The morning sun rose over the crystal city of Veltar on the planet Kepler 442b and painted the sky in soft purple and gold colors. Elder Zara stood on her balcony and watched her people begin another peaceful day. The Zilani moved through their streets like flowing water, their crystalline skin catching the light as they tended to their gardens and shared knowledge with each other. Children played among the healing pools while their parents worked on new medicines that could cure diseases across the galaxy. Zara smiled as she watched young Keel help an elderly Zilani tend to the crystal flowers that grew in their city center. This was how life should be, she thought. No anger, no violence, just beings living in harmony with their world and each other. The Zilani had built their entire civilization on the idea that all life was precious and that problems could always be solved through talking and understanding. The crystal towers of their cities hummed with energy that came from their planet's core. They had learned long ago how to work with their world instead of taking from it. Their technology grew like living things, shaped by thought and care rather than force. They could heal any wound and grow food that tasted like starlight. But they had never made a weapon because the very idea of hurting another being made no sense to them. But that morning, everything changed. The sky tore open with the sound of thunder that never stopped. Massive ships appeared above their world, bigger than their largest cities and black as the void between stars. The ships moved in formation like a pack of hunting beasts, blocking out the twin suns and casting shadows over the crystal cities below. Zara felt fear for the first time in her long life. The emotion was so strange and terrible that she almost fell to her knees. Around her, other Zilani stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky with the same confused terror. They had no words for what they were seeing because they had never imagined that such things could exist. The first attack came without warning. Beams of energy lanced down from the ships and struck the outer districts of Veltar. Where the beams touched, crystal buildings melted like ice in fire. Zilani who had been walking in those streets simply vanished. Their bodies turned to dust in an instant. The survivors stood in shock, unable to understand what had happened to their friends and families. More ships descended from the fleet above. These were smaller but no less terrifying, filled with creatures that the Zilani would later learn were called the Kreth. The Kreth were tall and reptilian with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like black diamonds. They carried weapons that spat fire and death, and they moved with purpose that spoke of violence refined over countless years. The Kreth commander, a massive creature with scars covering his scaled hide, landed in the center of Veltar with 100 of his warriors. He looked around at the crystal city and the gentle beings who lived there, and he laughed. It was a sound like rocks grinding together, harsh and cruel. "I am War Master Thak of the Kreth Empire," he announced through a device that translated his words into the musical language of the Zilani. "This world now belongs to us. You will work for us or you will die. There is no third choice." Elder Zara stepped forward, her crystalline features showing confusion rather than fear. "We do not understand," she said in her soft voice. "Why do you wish us harm? What have we done to anger you? Please sit with us and tell us how we can help you find peace." Thak studied her for a moment, then backhanded her across the face with casual cruelty. Zara fell to the ground, her crystal skin cracked and bleeding silver blood. The sight of their elder being hurt sent ripples of shock through the gathered Zilani, but still they did not understand what violence meant. "You speak of peace," Thak said, standing over Zara's fallen form. "Peace is what the weak cry for when the strong take what they want. Your world has minerals we need and workers we can use. You will give us both or we will take them from your corpses." The Kreth warriors spread out through the city, herding confused Zilani into groups like livestock. They destroyed the healing pools and tore down the crystal gardens, replacing beauty with ugly metal structures that hurt to look at. When Zilani tried to ask why they were doing these things, the Kreth answered with the butts of their weapons. Days passed in a nightmare that the Zilani could not wake up from. The Kreth separated families and forced the strongest Zilani to work in mines that scarred their beautiful world. Children were taken from their parents and locked in dark places where their light began to dim. The elderly and sick were left to die because they could not work hard enough to please their new masters. Zara, her face still bearing the crack from Thak's blow, managed to reach the communication center beneath the city. The Kreth had not bothered to destroy it because they did not think the peaceful Zilani could cause them any trouble. With shaking hands, she activated the quantum array that could send messages across the galaxy. "Please," she whispered into the device, her voice carried by invisible waves through the void of space. "We are the Zelani of Kepler 442b. We are a peaceful people who have never known war, and now strange beings have come to our world. They hurt us and take our children. We do not understand why they do these things, but our people are dying." She paused, listening to the sounds of her city being destroyed above her head. Crystal structures that had taken centuries to grow were being torn down in minutes. The songs of her people were being replaced by the harsh commands of their captors. "We offer everything we have," she continued. "Our knowledge of healing, our medicines that can cure any disease, our food that can grow anywhere. We will give all of this freely to anyone who can make these beings leave our world. Please, someone in the great dark between stars, help us. Our children are dying and we do not know how to make it stop." The message traveled through space at the speed of light, carrying with it the desperate hope of a people who had never known that such cruelty could exist. It would take weeks to reach the nearest civilized systems, and Zara did not know if anyone would even listen to the plea of a species so far from the main trade routes. But somewhere in the darkness, someone was listening. Someone who understood exactly what kind of help the Zelani really needed, even if they did not know it themselves. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee when the message changed everything. He sat alone in the communications center of the UES Defiance, monitoring the deep space channels like he did every night shift. Most of the time he heard nothing but the background hum of the universe, occasionally broken by routine traffic from merchant ships or distant colonies. But tonight was different. The signal came from a direction where no human had ever traveled, weak and fragmented but clearly artificial. Jake leaned forward and adjusted the receivers, trying to clean up the transmission. What he heard next made his coffee cup slip from his numb fingers and shatter on the floor. The voice was like music, soft and beautiful even through the static of interstellar space. But the words it spoke were pure desperation. Jake listened to the entire message 3 times before he fully understood what he was hearing. A peaceful alien species was begging for help against attackers who were enslaving and killing them. The part that made Jake's hands shake with anger was the description of children being taken from their parents. 5 years ago, Kreth raiders had hit the colony where his sister lived. When the human fleet arrived to drive them off, they found empty houses and blood on the walls. His sister Lisa had been 22 years old and planning to get married. He never saw her again. Jake played the message one more time, then reached for his communicator. "Captain Rodriguez to the comm center, urgent," he said, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. Captain Lisa Rodriguez arrived within minutes. Her dark hair still messy from sleep, but her eyes alert. She was one of the youngest ship captains in the human fleet, promoted after she led a brilliant defense of the Titan mining stations against pirate attacks. She listened to the alien message without speaking, her face growing harder with each word. "Kreth," she said when the message ended. It was not a question. "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied. "The description matches their methods. Hit peaceful targets, take slaves, strip the resources." Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, staring at the display that showed the distant star system where the message had originated. 3 weeks travel time, she said finally. "Maybe more." "Captain," Jake said carefully, "we both know what happens to prisoners the Kreth take. If these aliens are as peaceful as they sound..." "I know." Rodriguez touched the communicator on her wrist. "Admiral Johnson, Priority 1 communication required." The response came back immediately. "Transfer to secure channel." Admiral Carl Johnson appeared on the main screen moments later, his gray beard neatly trimmed despite being woken in the middle of his sleep cycle. Behind him, Jake could see the Earth through the viewport of the military station orbiting Mars. Johnson had been fighting pirates and slavers for 30 years, and his reputation for decisive action was known throughout human space. Rodriguez played the alien message for the Admiral without any introduction. Johnson listened with the expression of a man who had heard too many such pleas over the years, but his eyes grew dangerous when the musical voice described children being separated from their families. "How long since this was transmitted?" Johnson asked. "Best guess, about 3 weeks, sir," Rodriguez replied. "Long-range sensors show Kreth signatures in that system." Johnson was quiet for 10 seconds that felt like hours. When he spoke again, His voice carried the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. "Commodore Cross is at Titan Station with the 7th Fleet. I'm ordering her to your location immediately. You'll have full tactical command once she arrives." "Sir, what are our rules of engagement?" Rodriguez asked. Johnson's smile was not pleasant. "The Zilani asked for rescue, Captain. Give it to them. But make sure they understand that when humans come to help, we solve problems permanently." The next 72 hours transformed the quiet space around Titan Station into a hive of military activity. Commodore Helen Cross brought 12 ships with her, each one loaded with enough firepower to level a city. The crews that volunteered for the mission were mostly veterans who had lost friends or family to Kreth raids over the years. Among them was Sergeant Alex Turner, a Marine whose younger sister had been taken in the same raid that claimed Jake's sibling. Alex was 28 years old and had spent the last 5 years training for the day when he could make the Kreth pay for what they had done. He was not the only one with personal reasons for volunteering. Dr. Maria Santos joined the mission as Chief Medical Officer, bringing with her a team of combat medics who specialized in treating different alien species. Maria had studied every piece of information available about Zilani biology, preparing treatments for injuries and illnesses that might be caused by Kreth weapons and tactics. Captain Ben Parker commanded the assault carrier UES Storm's End, the largest ship in the fleet. Ben was 43 years old and had been fighting pirates since he was a junior officer. His ship carried 2,000 Marines and enough landing craft to put an army on a planet in less than an hour. As the fleet prepared for departure, intercepted Kreth communications painted a grim picture of what was happening on Kepler 442b. The aliens were systematically destroying Zilani culture, forcing survivors into labor camps and preparing to strip mine the planet's rare minerals. Intelligence reports suggested that over half the Zilani population was already dead or enslaved. The preparation went far beyond just loading weapons and supplies. Human engineers designed special equipment for fighting in crystalline cities, without destroying the delicate structures that the Zilani needed to survive. Combat teams practiced urban warfare scenarios in training facilities that simulated what they might find on the alien world. Dr. Santos worked around the clock with xenobiologists to understand Zilani physiology. The aliens were silicon-based rather than carbon-based like humans, which meant their bodies worked in completely different ways. Their crystalline skin could shatter like glass, but it could also heal itself if given the right minerals and energy. Most importantly, they seem to be psychologically incapable of violence or even understanding it. They literally cannot comprehend what the Kreth are doing to them. Dr. Santos explained to the senior staff during their final briefing. To them, violence is like a natural disaster that makes no sense. They cannot fight back because their brains are not wired for aggression. Captain Parker studied the intelligence reports with growing anger. "So they're completely helpless." "Worse than helpless," Rodriguez replied. "They're trying to negotiate with creatures who see their peaceful nature as weakness to be exploited." Commodore Cross addressed the assembled fleet commanders on the day of departure. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes like winter storms, known for tactical brilliance and absolute ruthlessness when dealing with those who preyed on the innocent. "The Zilani called for rescue," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the communication system. "They have no idea what that really means when humans answer the call. They think rescue means asking the bad guys to leave nicely. We know better." She paused, looking at each captain in turn. "The Kreth understand only one language, and we're going to speak it fluently. By the time we're done, they'll know that touching peaceful species brings consequences they cannot imagine." The fleet departed Titan Station in a formation that spoke of controlled violence held in check. 12 ships carrying the full weight of human military technology, and the focused rage of a species that had never learned to tolerate bullies. They moved through hyperspace toward Kepler 442b, with the deadly grace of predators who had found their prey. Behind them, they left standing orders for the rest of the human fleet. Any ship that could be spared was to follow as backup. The message was clear. This was not just a rescue mission. It was a statement that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The 3-week journey to Kepler 442b became a time of final preparation and growing determination. Every human on every ship knew that they were not just going to save one species from slavery. They were going to demonstrate what happened when someone hurt the innocent in a universe where humans existed. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, like wolves emerging from a dark forest. Commodore Cross stood on the bridge of her flagship and studied the tactical display with cold fury. 12 massive Kreth battleships surrounded the planet in a blockade formation, while smaller vessels moved back and forth like insects feeding on a corpse. "Sensor report," Cross ordered. "Confirmed Kreth occupation?" "Ma'am," came the response from Lieutenant Davis at the tactical station. "Massive orbital bombardment damage visible on the planet's surface. Multiple mining operations in progress. And ma'am, we're detecting weapon signatures consistent with mass execution sites." Cross felt her jaw tighten, but kept her voice level. "Communications, open a channel to the Kreth fleet." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the lead Kreth battleship. War Master Thak filled the view, his scarred reptilian features twisted in what might have been amusement. Behind him, Cross could see Kreth warriors moving around consoles that were stained with what looked like blood. "Humans," Thak said in accented standard. "You are far from your territory, mammals. This system belongs to the Kreth Empire by right of conquest." "I am Commodore Cross of the Human Federation Navy," Cross replied with icy politeness. "You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately and release all prisoners." Thak's laugh sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Or what, little human? You bring 12 ships against our mighty fleet? We have been conquering worlds since before your species learned to make fire." Cross smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "War Master Thak, you have exactly 1 hour to begin evacuation procedures. Use that time wisely, foolish mammals," Thak snarled. "Witness the power of the Kreth Empire." The screen switched to a feed from the planet's surface showing Kreth soldiers herding groups of Zilani civilians toward what were clearly execution sites. "These crystal insects die unless you leave now." The bridge of Cross's ship went dead silent. Every human present stared at the screen showing innocent aliens being forced to their knees, while Kreth executioners raised their weapons. Captain Rodriguez, standing beside Cross, whispered something under her breath that might have been a prayer or a curse. Cross closed the channel and turned to her communications officer. "Lieutenant Morrison, open a priority channel to the planet's surface. Find any surviving Zilani authority figures." The response came within minutes, weak and filled with static but unmistakably the musical voice they had heard in the original distress call. Elder Zara appeared on screen, her crystalline features showing new cracks and her light dimmed by weeks of suffering. "Blessed beings from the stars," Zara said, her voice trembling with desperate hope. "You heard our call. Oh, blessed ones, you came to help us." Cross felt something twist in her chest at the sight of the broken alien elder. "Elder Zara, I am Commodore Cross. We received your message and came as quickly as possible. Can you tell us your current situation?" "The Dark Ones came from the sky and brought the ending to our people," Zara said, struggling to find words for concepts her language had never needed. "They make our children disappear and force our strongest to work in the deep places until their light goes out. We ask them why they hurt us, but they only laugh and hurt us more. How many of your people are still alive?" Cross asked gently. Zara's light flickered sadly. "Less than half remain, and fewer each day. The Dark Ones say they will make us all disappear if the sky beings do not leave. But please, blessed ones, do not abandon us. We do not understand why they bring the ending, but we know you are good because you answered our call." Cross looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. She saw the same expression on every face that she felt on her own. A cold, controlled rage that spoke of justice delayed but not denied. These gentle creatures had no concept of evil, no understanding of why someone would hurt others for pleasure or profit. They were innocents in the truest sense, and they were being murdered by monsters. "Elder Zara," Cross said carefully, "I need you to understand something. We are going to help you, but the help we bring is not what you expect. We are not going to ask the Kreth to leave. We are going to make them leave. Do you understand the difference?" Zara's crystalline features showed confusion. "I do not understand, Blessed One. How can you make someone do something without asking? Is there another way to communicate with them?" Lieutenant Commander Morrison stepped forward from his station. Cross could see the pain in his eyes as he looked at the innocent alien, who had no framework for understanding what was about to happen. "Elder Zara," Morrison said softly, "humans have ways of solving problems that your people have never needed to learn. The Kreth will never hurt your people again after today. You have my word on that." "Your words fill us with hope," Zara replied. But how will you convince them to return our children and leave our world? Morrison exchanged a look with Cross, then spoke with quiet certainty. We won't convince them, Elder, we'll show them. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in heavy silence. Cross looked at her tactical display, showing the Kreth fleet in all its arrogant confidence. The aliens had no idea what they were about to face. In their experience, other species would negotiate, beg, or run away. They had never encountered a species that responded to atrocities with methodical total war. All ships, this is Commodore Cross, she announced over the fleet communication channel. The Kreth have made their position clear. They believe we will negotiate with child killers and slave takers. They are about to learn how wrong they can be. She paused, thinking of gentle Zara and her people who could not even comprehend the evil that had been done to them. The Zilani asked for rescue. They have no idea what rescue means when humans provide it. They think we're going to talk the Kreth into leaving. Instead, we're going to demonstrate why you never hurt innocents when Deathworlders are watching. Captain Parker's voice came over the channel from the assault carrier. Commodore, my Marines are ready for immediate deployment. Just give us a target. Negative, Captain. First, we clear the space around this planet. I want every Kreth ship either destroyed or fleeing before we land troops. The Zilani need to understand that when humans come to help, we solve the problem completely. Cross turned to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Davis, plot firing solutions for all Kreth vessels. Target their engines first. I want some of them alive to spread the word about what happens when you cross humans. Yes, ma'am. All ships report ready for combat. Cross looked one more time at the planet where gentle beings were suffering at the hands of monsters. The Zilani had called for rescue, never imagining that rescue could come in the form of controlled violence wielded by creatures from a world so harsh it had forged them into weapons of justice. All ships, Cross announced with deadly calm, engage. The battle for Kepler 442b began with a symphony of destruction that lit up the space around the planet like a second sun. Human railguns spoke with voices of thunder, sending projectiles through Kreth shields as if they were made of paper. The Kreth had expected a negotiation or perhaps a brief skirmish before the humans retreated like other species had done. Instead, they found themselves fighting opponents who moved like pack hunters, coordinated their attacks with split-second precision, and showed no mercy to those who trafficked in suffering. The humans had come to give the Zilani exactly what they had asked for: rescue. They just had no idea what rescue looked like when it was delivered by Deathworlders who had learned to fight in the crucible of a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. The Battle of Kepler 442 began at 800 ship time, and would be remembered across the galaxy as the day the universe learned what human warfare really looked like. The first salvo came from Captain Parker's assault carrier, the UES Storm's End, whose main railgun battery sent a tungsten rod through the shields and hull of a Kreth battleship, like it was made of tissue paper. The Kreth fleet responded with their own weapons, massive energy beams that could melt through most ship armor in seconds, but the human ships moved like living things, weaving and dodging with impossible grace while their own weapons spoke with voices of controlled thunder. The humans had learned to fight in the deep void between planets where there was no up or down, no solid ground to stand on, only the endless dark and whatever death machines you brought with you. War Master Thak watched from his command bridge as 3 of his battleships died in the first 5 minutes of combat. The human ships fought in formations that seemed impossible, covering each other with overlapping fields of fire while striking like a pack of spaceborne wolves. This was not the careful, formal combat that most galactic species practiced. This was something primal and terrifying. All ships, concentrate fire on the lead human vessel, Thak ordered, his scaled hands gripping his command chair as another of his ships exploded in brilliant silence. But the humans were not cooperating with Kreth tactics. Instead of standing and trading blows like civilized warriors, they moved in patterns that spoke of millions of years spent as persistence hunters on a world where everything was trying to kill them. They struck from unexpected angles, used debris fields for cover, and coordinated their attacks with timing that seemed almost telepathic. Captain Rodriguez commanded the heavy cruiser UES Defiance with the cold precision of a surgeon using a scalpel. Her ship danced between the massive Kreth vessels, targeting their weapon systems with railgun strikes that left the enemy ships crippled but not destroyed. She wanted survivors to carry word of what happened when humans decided someone needed to die. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Morrison reported from his tactical station, "Enemy vessel attempting to ram us." Rodriguez watched the damaged Kreth ship lumber toward them with what remained of its engines. Negative on evasive action. Target their bridge with precision fire. The railgun spoke once, and the Kreth ship's command center simply ceased to exist. The vessel tumbled helplessly through space, its crew dead or dying. A monument to the difference between Kreth brutality and human precision. The space battle lasted 4 hours. But the real war began when Sergeant Alex Turner's Marines launched from their assault ships toward the planet's surface. Turner had been waiting 5 years for this moment, ever since Kreth raiders took his sister from the colony where she lived. He led his platoon through the orbital defenses with the focused determination of a man who had finally found the monsters under his bed. The Kreth ground forces were expecting the slow, careful advance that most galactic species used when attacking a fortified position. Instead, they found themselves facing opponents who moved through urban combat zones like they had been born in them. Human Marines flowed through the crystal streets of Zelani cities like liquid death, using tactics developed in the gang wars of Earth's megacities and refined in a dozen colonial conflicts. Dr. Maria Santos followed the combat teams with her medical units, setting up field hospitals in buildings that the Marines had cleared just minutes before. She worked frantically to save Zelani civilians who had been shot or beaten by their Kreth captors, her hands steady despite the sounds of battle raging just outside her makeshift operating rooms. "Doctor," one of her medics called out, "we have a group of Zelani children here. They've been separated from their families for weeks." Maria looked at the young Zelani, their crystalline skin dull and cracked from malnutrition and fear. They huddled together in a corner of what had once been a beautiful crystal garden, now littered with Kreth weapons and the debris of battle. The sight filled her with a cold rage that threatened to overwhelm her professional detachment. "Get them to the evacuation zone," she ordered. "Full medical workup on all of them, and find out if any of them know where their parents are." The Kreth had made the mistake of thinking that humans would fight like other species, carefully, formally with respect for the rules of civilized warfare. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that had been forged in the crucible of the most dangerous world in known space. Humans did not fight to prove their courage or to gain honor. They fought to win, and they had learned to do it with a efficiency that was both beautiful and terrifying. Captain Parker led the assault on the main Kreth stronghold personally, his command squad moving through the enemy fortifications like ghosts made of gunpowder and determination. The Kreth defenders fell back room by room, corridor by corridor, but there was nowhere to run. The humans had surrounded the entire complex and were closing in from all directions with the patience of apex predators who knew their prey was already dead. "Contact front," Sergeant Turner reported over the radio as his squad encountered a group of Kreth guards executing Zelani prisoners. "Enemy forces engaging civilians." Parker's response was immediate and without emotion. "Clear them out, Sergeant." No survivors. The firefight was brief and decisive. The Kreth had weapons and armor, but the humans had something more important. They had purpose. Every Marine in that complex was fighting for something bigger than themselves, and that made them more dangerous than any weapon the Kreth could imagine. Turner found the execution site and felt his training almost desert him. Dozens of Zelani civilians lay dead or dying, shot down while trying to protect their children. Among them was an elderly Zelani, who reminded him painfully of his grandmother, a being whose only crime had been living on a world that contained resources the Kreth wanted. "Turner." "Report," Parker's voice crackled over the radio. "Area secure." "Sir," Turner replied, his voice steady despite the fury building in his chest. "Multiple civilian casualties. The Kreth were using them as human shields." "Understood. Continue the advance." The final Kreth position fell when human engineers brought down an entire mountainside on top of it. They used controlled explosives placed with mathematical precision, turning tons of rock into an avalanche that buried the enemy command center under 100 meters of stone. It was elegant, efficient, and utterly final, the kind of solution that only humans would conceive and execute. Elder Zara watched the end of the battle from the safety of a human medical station, her crystalline features showing confusion rather than relief. Around her, human medics worked to save her people, while human engineers began repairing the damage done to her city. But she could not understand what she had witnessed. Why did they choose to end the Dark Ones instead of talking to them? She asked Dr. Santos, who was treating a crack in her crystal skin. Maria paused in her work, considering how to explain human concepts of justice to a being who had no framework for understanding violence. Because some problems cannot be solved with words. Elder, the Kreth would never have stopped hurting your people as long as they were alive to do it. But they could have chosen to be different, Zara said with the innocent certainty of someone whose species had never encountered true evil. All beings can choose to be better. Not all beings, Elder, Maria replied gently. Some choose to be monsters, and when they do, others have to choose to stop them. The space around Kepler 442b was littered with the debris of Kreth ships, but one vessel remained intact. Commodore Cross had deliberately allowed the command ship to survive, though she had destroyed its weapons and engines. War Master Thack and his surviving crew sat in their darkened bridge, waiting for the humans to board and kill them. Instead, Cross opened a communication channel. War Master Thack, you are free to leave this system. Repair your ship and go. But understand this. Every species in the galaxy will know what happened here today. They will know that the Kreth Empire encountered humans, and they will see what remains of your fleet. Thack stared at the human commander with something approaching fear. You would let us live? I want you to live, Cross replied with cold certainty. I want you to go back to your empire and tell them what happens when someone hurts innocents while humans are watching. I want every slaver and child killer in the galaxy to know that we exist, and that we remember. The surviving Kreth ship limped away from Kepler 442b 12 hours later, carrying with it a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations. The Kreth Empire had learned what many others would learn in the years to come, that there was a species in the universe that responded to atrocities not with negotiations or protests, but with the kind of methodical, total warfare that left no room for misunderstanding. The liberation of Kepler 442b took 14 more days after the space battle ended, and during those 2 weeks, the Zilani learned what rescue actually meant when it came from Deathworlders. They watched in amazement and growing confusion as human marines moved through their ruined cities with the methodical efficiency of professional exterminators, clearing out every last Kreth holdout with ruthless precision. Elder Zara stood in what had once been the central plaza of Veltar, watching human engineers work to restore power to her city. The crystal towers that had taken centuries to grow were cracked and broken, but the humans were already installing temporary power sources and communication arrays. They worked with tools that seemed brutal compared to Zilani technology, but they got results faster than anything her people had ever imagined. Elder, Dr. Maria Santos approached with a datapad in her hands. We have located approximately 3,000 of your people in the various work camps. Most are in poor health, but they should recover with proper care. Zara's light brightened slightly. 3,000? But we numbered nearly 50,000 before the Dark Ones came. Maria's expression became carefully neutral. Yes, Elder. We're still searching for more survivors, but... She did not finish the sentence. There was no need to explain to Zara that the Kreth had murdered most of her people for the simple crime of being too weak to work or too old to be useful. Captain Parker walked through the plaza with Sergeant Turner, both men studying the tactical displays on their portable computers. Even with the Major fighting over, they were taking no chances. Human combat engineers were installing sensor networks and defensive positions throughout the city, turning the beautiful crystal structures into a fortress that could withstand any future attack. Sergeant, Parker said, pointing to a section of the city that had suffered heavy damage. I want that entire district swept again. The Kreth are like roaches. There's always one more hiding somewhere you didn't expect. Turner nodded, then paused. Sir, what about the Zilani? They keep asking us why we killed all the Kreth instead of just making them leave. Parker was quiet for a moment, watching a group of human medics help injured Zilani civilians toward the medical station. They don't understand evil, Turner. To them, the Kreth were just confused beings who needed to be taught how to be nice. They can't comprehend that some problems can only be solved with violence. Does that make us the bad guys, sir? No, Sergeant. It makes us the only ones who understand what peace actually costs. Lieutenant, Commander Morrison found himself trying to explain human concepts of justice to a group of young Zilani who had survived the work camps. They sat in a circle around him in one of the temporary shelters, their crystalline features showing confusion as he tried to make them understand why the humans had chosen to kill their captors rather than simply asking them to leave. But why did you choose to end them? Asked a young Zilani named Keel, his voice carrying the musical quality that all his species shared. Could you not have shown them a better way to live? Morrison struggled to find words that would make sense to beings who had never encountered true malice. Keel, imagine if someone was hurting your family and would not stop no matter how many times you asked them to. What would you do? I would keep asking, Keel replied with innocent certainty. Everyone can choose to be better if you just show them how. But what if they didn't want to be better? What if they enjoyed hurting people? Keel's light flickered with confusion. But why would anyone choose to hurt others? It makes no sense. Morrison looked around at the other young Zilani, seeing the same incomprehension on every face. These beings literally could not understand evil because their brains were not wired for it. They were as incapable of violence as humans were incapable of breathing underwater. Sometimes, Morrison said carefully, there are beings in the universe who choose to hurt others because it makes them feel powerful. When that happens, other beings have to choose to stop them. But you chose to end them completely, another young Zilani said. Could you not have just made them promise to stop? Morrison thought of his sister, taken by Kreth raiders when she was barely older than these innocent creatures. He thought of the mass graves the Marines had found outside the work camps, filled with Zilani who had been worked to death or killed for sport. He thought of the execution sites where families had been murdered for the crime of trying to protect their children. Some promises can't be trusted, he said finally. Some beings will say anything to save themselves, then go right back to hurting people as soon as they think no one is watching. The conversation continued for hours, with Morrison trying to explain concepts like deterrence, justice, and the necessity of final solutions to beings who had no framework for understanding any of them. It was like trying to explain color to someone who had been born blind, or music to someone who had never heard sound. Commodore Cross stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking down at the planet that was slowly healing from the Kreth occupation. Her ships maintained a protective formation around Kepler 442b, while construction crews worked to build permanent defensive installations. The message had to be clear. This world was under human protection now, and anyone who threatened it would face the same fate as the Kreth. Commodore, Captain Rodriguez reported from the communication station. We're receiving messages from over a dozen species asking about what happened here. Word is spreading fast, Cross smiled grimly. Good, let them talk. Let every slaver and pirate in the galaxy know that there's a species out here that doesn't negotiate with child killers. Some of them are calling us aggressive expansionists, Rodriguez continued. They're saying we used excessive force. They can call us whatever they want, Cross replied. The important thing is that they understand the message. Touch the innocent and we'll come for you. Not to talk, not to negotiate, but to end the problem permanently. Dr. Santos finished her final medical report 3 weeks after the liberation began. The statistics made for grim reading. Of the original 50,000 Zilani, fewer than 8,000 had survived the Kreth occupation. Most of the dead had been killed outright, either in the initial bombardment or in the mass executions that followed. The survivors would need years of medical care and psychological support to recover from their ordeal. But they would recover, and their children would grow up free under their twin suns, protected by a network of human defensive satellites and monitoring stations. The Zilani would never again have to face the horror of beings who chose violence over peace, because now they had guardians who understood both. Elder Zara requested a final meeting with Commodore Cross before the human fleet departed. They met in the restored communications center beneath Veltar, with the afternoon light filtering through crystal walls that still bore cracks from Kreth weapons. Blessed One, Zara said, her voice carrying deep gratitude despite her obvious confusion. My people will always remember what you have done for us. But I must ask, why did you choose to end the Dark Ones instead of teaching them to be better? Cross looked at the gentle alien elder. This being whose species had evolved beyond the capacity for violence but had paid a terrible price for their innocence. Elder Zara, there are some lessons that can only be taught with finality. The Kreth needed to learn that there are consequences for hurting innocents. Not punishment, not rehabilitation, but consequences that cannot be undone or bargained away. But they could have chosen to change. Zara insisted with the unshakable faith of someone who had never encountered true evil. They had millions of years to make that choice. Cross replied gently. They chose differently. They chose to be predators who fed on the suffering of others. When someone makes that choice, others have to choose to stop them. Zara was quiet for a long moment, her crystalline features reflecting the light and patterns that spoke of deep thought. We called for rescue, but you brought us something else. We brought you tomorrow, Cross said. Your children will grow up free because everyone in the galaxy now knows that hurting peaceful species brings consequences they cannot escape. Sometimes elder peace is not something you can ask for. It's something you have to take and hold with strength. The human fleet departed Kepler 442b 6 weeks after their arrival, leaving behind a small garrison and enough defensive satellites to protect the system from any future attacks. They also left behind something more important, a reputation that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The Zilani never did fully understand what humans had done for them. They could only comprehend it as the time when the Sky People made the bad times stop forever. But they remembered, and they were grateful, and they built monuments to the humans who had answered their call for rescue with something far more permanent than words or negotiations. And in the darker corners of the galaxy, in the meeting places where slavers and pirates gathered to plan their next raids, new warnings began to circulate. "Don't touch the peaceful ones," they whispered to each other in whatever languages they spoke. The humans might come. The Zilani had asked for rescue, never imagining what rescue looked like when it was delivered by Deathworlders who had learned to fight in the crucible of a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it.